But first, hear this.
It's cool, it's groovy, it's number one, the Led Zeppelin.
What if I told you that two of the greatest rock bands in history, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, were more intertwined than you ever imagined? Behind the guitars, behind the legacy, lies a rivalry.
Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream.
Not loud or hostile, but subtle, ideological, and deeply musical. This isn't a story about diss tracks or tabloid feuds. It's about inspiration, evolution, and a quiet tension that pushed both bands to new creative heights. Because when titans exist at the same time, even if they don't face off directly, they're bound to collide through sound, success, and legacy. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how the Beatles paved the path for Led Zeppelin, how Zeppelin challenged the musical ceiling the Beatles built, and how the echoes of their unspoken rivalry shaped the very soul of rock. Think about this. In the span of just 10 years, music went from Love Me Do,
Love, love me do. You know I love you.
to Stairway to Heaven. That's not evolution, that's revolution. And both the Beatles and Led Zeppelin were steering the ship, often in opposite directions, but always forward. The cultural landscape wasn't just changing, it was being rewritten. Hair grew longer, or clothes got louder, politics got angrier, and music? Music became a weapon, a refuge, a philosophy. These bands didn't just ride the wave, they were the wave. That's what makes this rivalry so captivating. It wasn't about hatred, it was about vision. Two perspectives on the same dream. The Beatles came first. 1960s Liverpool lads turned global superstars. In just a few years, they changed the music business, youth culture, and the idea of what a band could be. Hits like She Loves You, gave way to revolutions like Tomorrow Never Knows.
Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream.
They matured faster than any band before or since. Then came Led Zeppelin, born in 1968 from the ashes of the Yardbirds. Jimmy Page didn't want to follow trends. He wanted to build a new empire. Zeppelin's debut wasn't a soft launch. It was a thunderclap. It didn't just announce a band, it declared a shift in the rock climate. While the Beatles were wrapping up with experimental works like Abbey Road, Zeppelin was just stepping onto the battlefield. The Beatles were studio scientists. With George Martin, they turned Abbey Road into a lab. They layered vocals, reversed guitar solos, created entire orchestras from scratch. They didn't just write songs, they built sonic worlds. And by the mid-60s, they had quit touring because they knew the studio gave them more freedom. Zeppelin did the opposite. Their studio work was powerful, but their true genius shone on stage. They redefined the live experience. Songs like Dazed and Confused would stretch to 20-minute monsters. Each performance unique, volatile, and thrilling. Where the Beatles sought transcendence through precision, Zeppelin sought it through improvisation and power. Both were innovators, but in completely different arenas. Early on, critics dismissed Zeppelin. Rolling Stone famously panned their first two albums. Critics saw them as self-indulgent, even derivative. The Beatles, meanwhile, were critical darlings, praised for depth, wit, and relevance. The cultural elite embraced them. For Zeppelin, the respect came later, from the people, not the press. That imbalance created tension, not publicly acknowledged, but simmering under the surface. Jimmy Page once said, "We weren't part of the establishment, and we didn't want to be." But not wanting recognition doesn't mean not noticing its absence. Despite the differences, Zeppelin couldn't escape the Beatles' shadow. The Beatles had changed the rules. Albums mattered more than singles. Storytelling and experimentation became expected. The Beatles turned musicians into artists. Zeppelin followed that blueprint, but made it heavier, darker, more primal. Stairway to Heaven, with its evolving structure and mythic lyrics, owes something to A Day in the Life, in ambition, if not in sound. And the Beatles? They noticed. Lennon was skeptical of the bombast, but admitted Zeppelin had presence. Paul McCartney praised their musicianship. George Harrison appreciated Page's skills, even inviting him to jam at Friar Park. By 1970, something interesting happened. Paul McCartney released his lo-fi solo debut, filled with homey acoustics. That same year, Led Zeppelin released Led Zeppelin III, a surprising turn toward folk and acoustic introspection. Was it a coincidence or a silent nod? Critics were baffled, but fans saw the range. Zeppelin wasn't just thunder. They were wind, wood, and roots. This pivot mirrored the Beatles' own journey, from rockers to explorers. The Beatles expressed vulnerability, Lennon's Julia, Harrison's Something, McCartney's Let It Be, each a window into the soul. Zeppelin, known for swagger, yes, but also depth. Tangerine, 10 Years Gone, All My Love. These were cries wrapped in distortion. This emotional contrast reveals another layer of rivalry, control versus chaos. The Beatles curated feelings. Zeppelin unleashed them. Fame hit the Beatles like a freight train. By 1966, the weight was unbearable. They couldn't tour, couldn't go outside, couldn't breathe. Their breakup in 1970 was a slow-motion tragedy. Zeppelin managed fame differently. They avoided media, stayed mysterious, but the pressure still existed. Addiction, exhaustion, tragedy. When John Bonham died in 1980, the band dissolved immediately. No drama, no press, just silence. The Beatles ended with noise. Zeppelin ended with honor. Both were worn down by the same beast. The Beatles left behind more than songs. They left behind a blueprint for how to be a band. Their influence is everywhere, in pop, rock, hip-hop, even electronic music. Zeppelin reshaped hard rock. Their sound birthed metal, influenced grunge, and continues to echo in bands from Tool to Greta Van Fleet. The Beatles gave us melody, innovation, hope. Zeppelin gave us scale, attitude, power. One reached upward, the other struck like lightning, weighing. There was no feud, no diss tracks, no sabotage, but there was tension, artistic, philosophical, cultural. The Beatles made music safe to be smart. Zeppelin made it safe to be loud. Their rivalry wasn't personal, it was planetary. The Beatles evolved from simple chord structures to complex modulations, odd time signatures, and harmonic layering. Listen to Happiness is a Warm Gun. It's essentially 3 songs stitched together. Led Zeppelin built tension and release into their compositions. Black Dog plays with rhythm to disorient the listener. Kashmir uses modal progressions and a relentless groove that feels both ancient and futuristic. The Beatles were the voice of 60s optimism and revolution. Their evolution matched a generation's search for meaning. Zeppelin reflected the 70s reality, gritty, raw, electrified. Where the Beatles asked us to imagine, Zeppelin let us feel the fire. In 1969, George Harrison and Jimmy Page crossed paths at London parties. Paul McCartney attended a Zeppelin show and was reportedly blown away. There were whispers of a Lennon Plant collaboration that never materialized. No bad blood, just artists observing each other's ascent. The Beatles influence artists across every genre, from Kendrick Lamar to Taylor Swift. Zeppelin's DNA lives in Foo Fighters, Beyoncé, and the entire hard rock lineage. Their rivalry bred diversity. Together, they gave artists permission to create without limits. Imagine Lennon's grit with Plant's howl, McCartney's bass with Bonham's fury, Harrison's sitar against Page's fuzzed-out riffs. Could they have found harmony in the chaos? We'll never know. But even in silence, they were speaking to each other through the music. So, here we are, decades later, still listening, still wondering, still inspired. The Beatles taught us to look inward. Zeppelin taught us to let it out. Their rivalry wasn't just hidden, it was holy. Thanks for watching. If this story changed how you hear these bands, do something they'd both respect. Share the music. Keep the fire alive. Now hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. If the Beatles and Zeppelin made one song together, what would it sound like? Until next time, keep your ears open and your heart louder than ever.